Alrighty, we're gonna do 5 seconds of silence just for recording and editing purposes, and then we'll go live. So. Unpacking Mormonism is a subsidiary of Daisy Girl Communications, LLC. All content herein is intended for educational purposes only and does not replace the advice or counsel of your personal care provider. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma. I'm your host, Sarah Westbrook, joined today by my very sexy husband, Mason, and one of our best friends in the entire universe, Ian Lumgair.
Not sure what a uniforce is.
Welcome. Hello.
Hi, Ian.
Hi.
Alrighty, so for our listeners, we were doing our planning meeting earlier, and I told Ian I was going to utilize this story, and we had a really good laugh. So our families, Ian, the Lumgairs and the Westbrooks, were eternally bonded in, I'm going to say, around late 2009, early 2010. Mason, you and I were in North Carolina. Mason was serving as the first counselor in the bishopric, or you may have been the executive secretary at that time. I don't remember, but you were in the bishopric in some capacity. And I was serving as the primary president. And Ian, how old would your oldest son have been at that time in 2010-ish?
He would have been 10, 11 years old.
10, 11 years old.
Somewhere in that, but yeah. Okay.
And I noticed that he was sitting in his chair a little bit uncomfortable, and that he was shifting around and kind of playing with himself a little bit in primary. I was a primary president, so I went up to him and I said, hey, kiddo, let's go outside. And I won't say his name because I don't want to embarrass him too bad. But I said, hey, kiddo, let's go out in the hallway and talk. And I thought I was going to have to give him if you need to go potty, let's go potty, but let's not put our hands in our pants in the middle of primary. And so I said, hey, kiddo, what's going on? And he was like, just adjusting. And I was like, no, it's a little bit more than just adjusting. Like I was thinking, hey, we've got some, mild masturbation going on in the middle of primary. And he says, well, I just have something in my pocket. And I said, well, how about you give that to me then? And so he reached down into his pants, into his underwear, y'all, and pulled out a small handful of Legos and plopped them into my cupped out hands like this. And I said, well, thank you. Do you have any more in there? And so he reached in and he pulled out a second handful of little mini Legos. And he said, that's all, Sister Westbrook. And I said, well, buddy, let's not bring these Legos into primary in the future. And they were not clean. I will say that there was some fecal content. He probably hadn't wiped. I mean, he's 10.
Oh.
Right?
Wow.
And I just carried those Legos into the Relief Society room. And I knelt down next to your beautiful wife, Jill. And I said, hey, Jill, Connor just gave these to me from his underwear. And she held out her hands. And I dumped them into her hands. And then I went to the bathroom and washed my hands. And we have been eternally bonded ever since.
That was the beginning of a long and fruitful relationship.
less shitty, for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't that awesome? Oh, man.
Yes.
I love that. I will love that boy forever. It also, we really became bonded because your son has got some special needs. And because our son, Brig, is about the same age.
Yep.
Our families also really bonded over just that shared experience of raising behaviorally challenging children. And Jill and I became very good friends because you and Mason were always off doing Army stuff.
Fact.
Yeah.
That was a very high rotation time in my life. Yeah.
Can you, for our non-military listeners, Ian, can you explain what that means, a high rotation time?
Between 2000 and 2014, when I retired, when we were still active duty, I spent approximately 11 years away from my family. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds like the military.
Yeah. Yeah. A huge amount of it was Iraq, Afghanistan. Part of it was Korea. Part of it was professional schooling. Um, just, stuff.
Well, and for those of you that aren't part of the military, that's excessive even for the military and even for that time period.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I remember my brother told me that when he'd been in the military for 5 years, and I think when he got out, he and his wife had been married for 3, and I think they had calculated they'd been together for about 7 months.
Yeah.
And it depends. We've calculated over the course of 20 years for us, it was probably about 5 years that we were separated.
No, I think it was 6 is what we said. So in 20 years, we were separated. And for Mason and I, it was more short spurts. Like I think the longest time period start to finish Mason was gone was just shy of 7 months. But the majority of Mason's rotations were 3 to 4 months gone at a time. But during that time, that 2009 to what, Mason, when did you end up going into anesthesia school? Because you went and did the captain's career course.
13.
So because we moved to North Carolina in August of 2009. So from that time until Mason started the medical school training, Mason was actually pretty stable there. He was not gone as much as most of the men in the ward, which actually probably lended itself quite a bit to why you were in the bishopric. Not just because you were amazing, which you are. Amazing, 100% amazing. But you were not gone as much as the majority of the men. Like there were times in that ward where we looked around and the ward was women and children and the bishopric. Like there were not, there were not very many.
That was a hard ward. That's Fort Bragg.
Yeah.
Center of the world, right?
Well, and our ward was nowhere near as bad as the actual Fort Bragg ward where men were hardly ever there.
Yeah.
Bragg has always been the kind of New York of the Army. Yeah. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. It's a real crucible. I mean, it honestly is. It's a tough road, and I spent 13 years of my career there, and I can tell you, every place else in the Army is almost a cakewalk by comparison.
I don't know. I'm going to challenge you that, Ian, because our experience at Fort Hood was that is where people go in the Army to die. Like not literal death, but as in career. It's just a hole. It's a dark hole of nothingness. So
I had some experience with Fort Hood because at one point I was liaison to the 16th MP Brigade, and 16th MP Brigade serves Fort Hood also. So I was going back and forth to them, and it is a black hole. It honestly, a lot of times there's a couple places in the Army, Polk, Hood, they're career enders. You have one opportunity to go someplace else, and that's probably Korea. And that's your only escape from that place, because once you're in the Fort Hood, it's so big. I mean, and there's so many units there. You will just enter post transfer, and you're there.
Right.
So
once you get stuck in the hood, you're stuck in the hood. So I agree with that. Like, Bragg is where you go for your career to thrive, and you're gonna, it's hard work, lots of separations if you make it. Yeah, if you make it. And Hood is where you go to kill your career.
Yeah.
All right. Great. So we're all on the same page. Let's see how we do for the rest of our show today.
Well, here we go.
All right. So what is our intention for today? Our intention is kind of to explore how culty is the word of wisdom. And I know a lot of our active LDS, or what we will commonly refer to as our TBM Mormon friends, don't like the idea that we say the Mormon church is a cult or the Mormon church is culty. We also hear kind of that minimization. Well, all religions are a cult. And yeah, I can get behind some of that, but also no, I'm going to say that there's a spectrum there. And so really what we're going to do today is explore the cultishness. That's a new word for Sarah, cultishness. I like it.
Let me see if I can spell that one.
That the word of wisdom is. And also to really give our listeners the opportunity to take their power back. So like, what are some skills from a behavioral health, a mental health perspective of how can we take our power back when it comes to reclaiming our individual wellness choices? And that's going to include pretty much everything that they cover in the Word of Wisdom. You know, we'll talk about maybe your exercise or your body movement, the substances you avoid, the substances you partake of, you know, lifestyle choices. But really, how can you make that back to that individual wellness that is guided by a framework, hopefully a scientific based framework versus a religious rules and whatnot. So that's where we're going to go. And Ian, we invited you on the show today because in our time over the last decade and plus time period, you've had a lot to say. You've got some pretty strong opinions when it comes to the Word of Wisdom. And I thought, what a great opportunity for the world to really hear and resonate with what you've got to say. Because I think that what you have to say is absolutely valuable for those who have involvement within the Mormon church, but also those that are in other systems where there's a health code. And so I thought, Ian, let's let you take. Oh, go ahead, Mason. Mason's going to steal your thunder, Ian. What do you want, Mason?
Well, I just want to point out, too, again, this is unpacking Mormonism. We're not saying that the Word of Wisdom, living it or not living it, is bad or good. Not at all. Like, as an organization, we have no vested interest in whether you live or don't live the Word of Wisdom. This is really about unpacking what is in the Word of Wisdom. Why are we living it? Why are we either holding rigidly or not holding rigidly to it? Those kind of things. How do things like the Word of Wisdom contribute to a cult-like control over members? And if you recognize that in your life and you decide, you know what, I'm still okay with that, fine, right? All we've ever wanted is for people to be more informed about how different aspects of religion affect and even control your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ian. It's all you now, man.
I guess we're talking about my personal journey with the Word of Wisdom. Is that what we're talking about at this point?
So we were going to start with like the origins and the intentions, but if you feel like you want to start with your personal journey, you do you.
No. I get you what you're saying. I've done actually a significant amount of research on the Word of Wisdom when it comes to its origins and what its original intent was, and a really good resource to get that from. If any of your listeners are interested in it, it is the Historical Analyst of the Word of Wisdom, a thesis presented to the Department of History of Brigham Young University, and this is done by it's a Masters of Arts thesis by Paul H. Peterson, and it's August of 1972. He does a really very thorough, complete analytic look at the Word of Wisdom, where it comes from, what he believes the original intent was, where kind of got its feeling, because when you're talking about any type of health recommendation based on something that could be utilized as pseudoscience, because that's where this honestly comes from. There was an overall there at the time frame, there was an overall thought process that went into how what you took into your body did certain things to your body, and you would have overwhelming health because of it.
So Ian, I'm going to pause you really quickly. Yeah. Do you have a link for that analysis or that thesis?
I have a document in my computer. I can send it to you.
That'll be fine.
If you could do that, because we want to
Yeah.
make sure that the listener has access to the source material when that source material is available. And so what we'll do is we'll upload that document to the resource stuff. So listener, if you're interested in taking a look at where Ian is pulling a lot of his information for today, we will make sure that this document gets uploaded to the website at daisygirlcommunications.com. It'll be in the resources link, and we'll make sure that we tag that and get an internet link to that so that we can then add that to the show notes. So I didn't want to stop your story, Ian. I just want to make sure that our listeners, if they want to pull this up and follow along with you as you go, they have that opportunity. So keep going.
Yeah, and it really, the feeling for this kind of thought process came, it was an overwhelming European and American movement that's really started in 1792 that kind of not just condemned like alcohol, tobacco, liquor, stuff like that. It condemned really drinking liquids altogether, thinking that they were bad for the gut, they're bad for the spirit.
That's awesome.
And, you know, it's kind of funny, but it went farther in that to the point where a guy that actually is the forefather of the Kellogg's brand of whatever you want to call it, Benjamin Rush, was in 1815. He was recommending things like eating sawdust and 3-gallon liquid enemas of yogurt, things, just really kooky things like that. And
I wonder what the fiber content is for sawdust. Like, would that constipate you or give you the runs? That's probably why they had to do the yogurt enemas.
Wow.
I think that's a squirrel. We could figure that out, but I don't think I'm really that interested.
I mean, honestly, that just sounds so shitty, don't you think? Ouch.
Had to make it weird.
The mighty and resilient Merrimack River, carving through the communities of our great region. My name is Linda Lorden, proud president of Merrimack County Savings Bank, and like the river that serves as our namesake, we're a constant yet ever-changing presence. Because to us, it's bigger than banking. It's about powering communities and putting people first. It's about knowing where you came from and where you're going. That's Merrimack style. Visit us at themerrimack.com.
So that's kind of the overall thing, and I get with Joseph Smith kind of leading this organization of new spiritual following that he had, is that he kind of wanted to help them out with a lot of their physical ailments in a very, I don't know how you want to put it, but a very non intrusive manner, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things, and I'm totally interrupting you, one of the things that's really common in the history or like the culture of the Mormon church is this spiritual spin on physical health codes. And so there's almost this, I know that, you know, I've got, on both sides, so on Mason's side of the family and on my side of the family, we have family members that are really interested in kinesiology and whatnot. And there's almost this tendency to avoid some of the science behind things and do like muscle testing to determine if a pill is good for you or a supplement is good for you, and like gaining this spiritual insight into what we should take in or out of our bodies. And I think that, you know, utilizing spirituality for health and wellness and food and stuff can be a very healthy thing. I think the boundary kind of gets a little extreme in certain circles fairly often within the Mormon culture with this spin of, well, God told me that eating encapsulated sawdust would be amazing for my colon health. And that's obviously a hyperbole.
Well,
that's a hyperbole example, right? Am I using the right word there, Mace?
well, and when you as a person or an organization cannot use science or investigation to verify that something works, it feels like one of the first choices that people make is then to make it a spiritual issue.
Right.
Well, God told me, or I've read the Bible, and from what I glean from that, this is how things should be. And so you use it as a piece of evidence, but it really isn't a piece of evidence.
Right, because it sets you up for there's only one right way for everybody.
Yes.
And this is right because God told me it was right, rather than God told me it was right for me, or I have experience with this substance,
Right.
or avoiding this substance helping me, and now you step into it. So like Joseph Smith may have started with honest intentions of improving the health and wellness of his followers, but where did we cross into that culty area? Go ahead, Ian. I'll
Right.
try not to interrupt you again, but I suck at it. So I love you. I'll buy you whiskey.
It's totally okay. It's funny, if you read Orrin Porter Rockwell's history, his self-history, he was never a person that didn't imbibe, and he was at Joseph Smith's elbow 24/7.
Right.
That was one of the things too, and also was pointed out in this report that there was many cases where Joseph Smith was admonished for having a few too many. In fact, there's one case that they have where he gave a speech on the word of wisdom with a cigar in his hand, and then participated in some horse racing up and down a road later that day. And that was kind of some of the church members kind of got a little anxious about that.
Well, and didn't Joseph Smith own not necessarily a brothel, but he owned a bar, didn't he? Like his restaurant served alcohol.
Yes.
And he drank wine the night he died. Like, isn't that in the record that he ordered wine up and they all had
Yes.
alcohol on the night that he was murdered?
Yes.
So I think it would say, it's probably fair to say Joseph Smith did not follow the health code that he claimed came directly from God at any point in his life. Would that be accurate?
That would be accurate, and it also would be accurate to say that he interpreted it as a health code. He didn't interpret it as an absolutism.
Right.
And that's where you get into some of the later prophets that really got into it. It was an absolute thing that you absolutely never did. And by absolutely violating it, you were absolutely committing a sin. It was kind of an invention of sin. And
wait. I love that. I love that phrase, invention of sin, because I see that a lot in Mormonism, like this, if you do that, that's an invention of sin. That's a sin, where it's really in what I would say, my opinion. And as we look at, evolutionary silence or just humanity in general, sin is kind of an overused term. And then once again, there's that other key of, hey, we're going to invent this to be a sin. And not that they were necessarily consciously or purposefully doing that, but rather by creating coffee is now sinful, we are gaining control over a group of people, which again sends us into that culty area, that behavioral control, which is something we'll talk about here coming up, and Stephen Hassan's bite model and whatnot with the word of, or with behavioral control. Go ahead.
Yeah, and the thing about it too is that we have a very intent belief in one singular thing, if you can define something that is very Mormon, and that is combining scriptures with the teaching of man. And essentially, you are taking something that is meant as a health thing, something to help you out health-wise, and you're creating an absolutism. And that is the quintessential nature of combining the teachings of man with scripture, because it was never, the original of it was never the intent of what it's become today.
Well, that's so funny, because in the temple ordinance, we talk about that men will mingle scripture with the teachings of men. But what you're talking about, Ian, is that's exactly what the church is doing. They are taking scripture and mingling it with what they want you to believe or follow.
Yes.
I'd never thought of it that way.
Yeah, I've gotten grief for saying this thing, but again, Jesus tipped over the carts for a very good reason, and the very good reason was that he did not believe that the laws of man, the rules of man, it wasn't really laws of man, it was the rules of man, then King Herod should be obstructing the access to the temple. And the laws of the Pharisees, they're nuts.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we're kind of gravitationally getting back there. We're doing it incrementally, just like they did, because the Pharisees took damn near 800 years to come into when they were really at the crest of their power. So we're kind of doing the same thing, progressively making this more tighter. We're saying, okay, you can only be under this sort of blessings if you're this way and stuff like that. The biggest perpetrator of this, one of the prophets, let me move my face here a little bit a second, was Herbert J. Grant. And he was vehemently part of the temperance movement from the very get-go. Even as a very young man, he pursued it, and he admonished his brethren of much senior to him as when they would misbehave. He actually laid into some of the very first founders of the church because they had bars, and at one point they owned bars and stuff like that. They participated in businesses, and we'll come to find out the church is participating in businesses that do not necessarily follow the word of wisdom as we speak. So,
well, and I think I want to say here too, I think it was also Heber J. Grant that developed the church's welfare system.
He did.
Yep. And if we look at what's going on in the news today about the tithing, money being mismanaged, and tax fraud and tax evasion, and we look at that accumulation of wealth, we can also say, hey, Heber, your welfare program sucks.
Yeah, it kind of went off the rails a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit off the rails. But I find that, when we look at patterns of leadership, we're saying the same thing, to obviously a very differing degree, different area. But once again, that behavioral control, you have to pay 10% to get into the house of the Lord. You have to obey the word of wisdom to get into the house of the Lord. So basically, your eternal salvation is at stake unless you follow the rules. And now we have behavioral control.
Right.
Yeah.
And go ahead, mate.
I actually was thinking about raising. You can see into my brain, Ian. I was only thinking about raising my hand.
Ian does better than me at that. You keep going, Ian. I'll learn from your example.
I think that it can be important to remember context too. You can say that your welfare system has gone to crap, and in a lot of ways it has. But when it was formed, it was probably one of the better systems available at the time. The church was hurting as much as any other organization was during that time. It was the Great Depression.
Right.
So it's important to see that in context. The welfare program in 1936 is completely. Well, not completely, but it's very in a lot of ways different than the welfare system that we have now. And certainly the resources are different than they were then.
Right.
But again, we're examining how do these things move to control rather than, the idea, the thought that came to my mind is that we hold this idea in Mormonism that Moses came down from the mount and he had the law of Christ ready to give to the people, and the people were worshiping the calf, and he got pissed off and he threw down the tablets, went back to God, and God gave him the law of Moses instead. I don't know that that's true. I don't see anything in the scriptures that certainly clarifies that that's the case. I've always believed that. I don't know if it's true, but the idea being, y'all screwed up, we're going to give you a law that controls your behavior now. And it feels like in a lot of ways, and then of course Christ came and he gave us a law that was not a behavior controller. And then as religion has gotten involved over the years, it's almost like religion cannot tolerate having people think for themselves, do for themselves. They have to get more involved, and they have to throw more rules, and they have to say, in this case, you're talking about the temple recommend in Mormonism, look, if you want all the things that you need to have for salvation, this is what you got to do. You got to pay your tithing, got to be honest, you got to live the word of wisdom, you can't have sex outside of marriage. And all of those things have a merit of good to them, but when they become the method by which you control someone, you may lose a lot of the power that is good, because you've turned it into a weapon. You weaponize that good thing.
Yeah, I love that, Mason.
Yeah, and it's funny, being a student of history, it's not just religious organizations.
No, not at all.
You can go to the NFL, right, and do the same thing. And their rule book went from something that you could put in your back pocket at one point to now is 14 appendices long, so it just seems like in the inevitable progression of human organization is that you are looking at a more stringent set of axioms that it runs on, I guess you would say.
Yeah, well, and
right?
when I am working with my clients, one of the things in my practice, one of the things that we work on is recognizing when you've given up your choice or your power in order to function in those systems, and then how to kind of take that back for yourself in a way that's healthy and not extreme. Because what you're going to see is, oh my goodness, I've given all my power away. Let me swing that pendulum to the other side of this extreme something. And now there's lots of drama and emotional explosion and high levels of intensity within relationship functioning. And really what we want to do is say things like, there are really good things that we learn from the word of wisdom that are backed by science even today. Things like eat plenty of fruits and vegetables, especially in the season, I think it's like the season thereof. That would still today be a healthy recommendation that your medical providers who study this, that's their area of expertise, your nutritionists' area of expertise, would agree with. Most of your herbalists will agree with that. And the, Mormon doctrine agrees with that thing, that statement for health. But hey, maybe some of these other ones we need to challenge, and we're not going to say if you don't eat your spinach like Popeye, you can't go to heaven. That's taking a recommendation to an extreme level. Unless
we get stock in the spinach companies, then we need to support spinach.
Yes.
Shop Plato's Closet tax-free August 2nd through 4th for back-to-school styles. We sell the trendy, gently used styles you need to make a difference in the world and in your wallet for back-to-school shopping. Save up to 70% off regular retail prices by choosing recycled styles. Save even more when you shop tax-free this weekend. Make a change that others can respect and repeat. Shop Plato's Closet in North Charleston and West Ashley this year for your back-to-school looks. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.
Yeah. Sure.
Thank you, Mason. That was phenomenal.
They do tend to self-profit themselves,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. we have a president of the United States that's doing that right now. Oh, did I say?
Oh, we went political. We went political. I would say, yeah. Where's Ian's
Let's back
squirrel? Ian needs a squirrel. That was not Sarah's squirrel. I am not the only one today that has ADHD. Okay, y'all. There it is. Thank you, Alex.
But that's the point, is that this is not, what you'd said was, this is not a religious thing.
No.
And when we talk about how is the word of wisdom a culty thing, we're not talking about religion in general. That's the pretext we come from. But yes, politics, families,
Parenting.
not just politics, but oh goodness gracious, patriotism. Your patriotism is used as a control method to keep you in line with what people want. So yeah, you can use these things in almost any pretext. It's not about the fact that the word of wisdom comes from Mormonism. And like you said, you know, a lot of people in the United States and Europe were against alcoholism for a long, long time. You know, it wasn't Mormons that got the 19th Amendment passed, which is the one that said no alcohol, right? It was the United States. So this isn't a Mormon problem. We're just, that's the pretext we come from.
Right, because what you're talking about is the unhealthy control over another individual or over a group of individuals. You know, that's when we start to pull in these cult terms, you know, from the behavioral health science vernacular, those vocabulary words we're going to be talking about, undue influence and, you know, exercising inappropriate power or dominion. You know, when we say unrighteous dominion in the church, that covers that. And that is, we are going to say this is the only way to be. And I would say, I don't care what political party you affiliate yourself with, or if you don't, you can see these patterns of behavior in probably every single president, world leader, you know, prime minister, king, mayor. I mean, parents in our own home.
Prophets.
All do. Yes, prophets. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all do this. This is a human thing. And what we can do is I don't like this word perpetrator for this, but I don't really have a better one, would be, you know, me, Sarah Westbrook, I need to recognize when I'm exercising unhealthy domains or practicing undue influence upon another human being and say, this is not healthy. As well as recognize when somebody is doing that to me, and then utilize those as data points for how I want to interact with those individuals, those organizations, or even how I need to course correct over those that I have that circle of control, or that my power of influence, circle of influence, so on and so forth with people. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And that was one of the things that Hubert J. Grant really brought to the forefront, which than any other church leader did, is that he was really the one that went through and absolutely prosecuted members of the church that would not adhere to the word of wisdom, that felt like it was an administration of health, you know, recommendations towards a better living. Because he did get some pushback on it, and he basically made it clear that you are either in this basket with me, and we're going to make this absolutism, or you are out of the church. Period. He went as far to go and try and get the voting rolls for the 21st Amendment, right? Yes. To see if members were a part of the supporting the getting rid of the temperance movement, getting rid of the what am I trying to say? Shoot, it's right at the tip of my tongue.
The alcohol abolishment. What was that called?
Yes,
Prohibition.
Prohibition.
I was trying to think of. Trying to get rid of prohibition. He was incredibly overcharged as far as this. That this was a real thing for him, and it kind of dovetailed into his latter years as the president, where he dovetailed that into pursuing people that had plural marriage, even though he was a participant in plural marriage. So this was and since then, he laid that foundation, and it has really struck home. The church to this day, it's almost exact quotes from him when it comes to temple recommends and how it applies to the word of wisdom, how your application of the word of wisdom applies to your temple recommend. Prior then, it wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that I just want to come to this too, that we have a habit of, like, if you look at you brought up prohibition, right? So you have an amendment. If for just that basic understanding of American history and the Constitution, it takes a lot of work, really, political effort and coming together to get an amendment to the Constitution. Mm-hmm. It's not a simple process. So the whole flavor of the United States at that time was enough to get that amendment passed. But the reality is, it failed too, right? I think it's the only amendment that we have where a few years later we have another amendment getting rid of that amendment. I think that's the only situation where that happened. And it demonstrates another thing that I think that is an important part of this principle, is that oftentimes, and of course I've learned this a lot from just Sarah and from therapy and things like that, is that oftentimes we see a problem and we think the fix is to just get rid of in this case, the substance that is causing the issue, without taking the time to look and go, you know what? Alcoholism is not the problem. Alcohol is not the problem. Maybe alcoholism is a big deal, but alcohol is not the problem. What is the problem? Well, the problem is, broken homes. The problem is poor. People are poor and they have no way to cope. And this is what's going on. There's trauma going on. People are torn apart from World War I. They're torn apart from all of these other things. We're not addressing the issues. We're just taking away a negative coping skill. And did they take it away? Of course, the answer is no. Well,
because you've got that, that law of scarcity. If I take something from you, then your brain is like, no, I need more of that, and it will seek after it. When we talk about addictions in my field, one of the things that we have found, and this is Gabor Mate's research in Canada, and that is that when we provide people with a safe environment where they have access to their substance that's not laced with other shit, where they've got treatment centers with clean needles, but also in those same treatment centers, they have access to mental health professionals and support groups and these types of things. The outcome is people are cleaning up their lives, they're learning how to connect within relationships, and they're getting sober and staying sober. Like, we're overcoming addiction, but not by taking the substance away. And, one of the things that we can talk about this on that big scale societal thinking, and you're going to have lots of different opinions. I know we're kind of getting into that political place and whatnot. I would encourage listeners, before you jump in with an opinion of, so should we do that in the United States? We can't give people safe places to drink or to utilize drugs and whatnot. I would say, hey, why don't you go take a look at those studies? And we'll definitely link some of that. Mason, remind me at the end, we'll link some of that research that's coming out of Canada, where the results are we're providing safety for people, and what we're seeing is safety leads to sobriety, connection leads to sobriety. I would say take a look at that before jumping to a conclusion of how we need to handle that politically. But also bringing this back to our topic today, one of the things that I see is that, Ian, what you're talking about, what Heber J. Grant did was he took this from a individual decision where each member makes the choice that is best for them, and he brought it right into black and white thinking, what you can't and can do, with that focus on what we can't do. Because how often in Sunday school classes have we talked about needing to exercise, keep a healthy BMI, getting up early in the morning, going to bed early at night? Like, I've got maybe in my memory 1 or 2 lessons on the cans of the word of wisdom, and I think I gave at least half of those when I was the teacher. You know, what's your guys' experience and thoughts on that?
I don't have a relative positive experience with the word of wisdom. I'm going to tell you right now. I'm a convert. I was in the church for 10 years prior to being a word of wisdom, being a member, an actual member, a baptized member. I was always the missionaries, project. But the atmosphere I grew up in, I grew up in a Scotch atmosphere. We drank all the time, but we were never, ever were you allowed to be rude, or were you allowed to get it out of control? And if it affected your family, well, the rest of the family was going to make you live with that fact very harshly. So there was a lot of self-governance there. And it was only when I was exposed to my stepfather, I really saw what the really downside of alcoholism could be. So I had a real strong background in you kind of do things at moderation, and you don't make an ass out of yourself, and you don't treat people poorly just because you've had a few.
Right. Well, and I absolutely love that what you're sharing is these were things that you were taught from a young age. So in that healthy environment, you've got little kids watching their parents drink responsibly. You're watching, hey, they got a little bit too much. They look like a fool. Let's support them and love them and then course correct. So you're modeling healthy moderation in a way that has long-lasting effects. And I would say, my theory would be, and minimizes that risk of addiction versus abstinence, which brings up that scarcity issue in our brain. So now because I'm drinking in secret and I don't have a healthy place to be an idiot, and I don't have somebody with me with the maturity level to say, hey, you've had a little bit too much. I'm going to start watering your drinks down or handing you bottles of water to make sure you stay hydrated or food to slow that down. Like, you don't have any of that healthy modeling, those healthy habits surrounding the consumption of alcohol. You're now in danger of a lot more addictive, like unhealthy behaviors because you don't have a safe environment to learn your limits in.
That was one of the problems with prohibition, actually, and why they ended up getting rid of it, is that they thought they could control alcohol, and they realized very quickly they could not control alcohol. And when you were now going to a speakeasy where it wasn't clear that alcohol was being served, the people there had no care or concern whatsoever for you as a person. They just wanted to sell you alcohol. And so it was unsafe. And that's the problem with controlling a substance rather than teaching appropriate behavior. Like you said, look, a song comes to mind, Granddad saying you can have a few, but don't ever cross that line. That's the idea, is like, look, if you want to drink some alcohol, okay, fine, I get it. You need to understand how it affects you. It's been interesting in our lives watching Sarah as she's kind of learned what she can drink and what she can't, what she likes, what she doesn't like, how much is too much, how much is too much, what are some safe environments for that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It's been a very healthy experience for her because she has a safe environment where she can do that. And we know of families who've gone through exactly what we're going through, where there is no safe environment to talk about the fact that I'm going to drink, what I want to, and if my answer is absolutely not, you cannot drink in my home, well, all I have done is invited her to go drink somewhere else with someone else
In secret.
who is not necessary, who probably does not have her best interests at heart.
Right.
Right.
Well, and when we talk about this as being a culty thing, you know, the word of wisdom being used as a behavioral control mechanism, you see these same patterns play out in lots of areas within the Mormon church and other religions. You know, I think about the law of chastity. We know from science that when we talk about utilizing a condom and safe sex practices, and we talk about making sure your partner is consenting and that both partners are experiencing pleasure and enjoying it, so on and so forth, that the end result is less unplanned pregnancy, less occurrences of STDs, more consent, so less rape, less issues, less taking advantage of people in drunken situations. You know, what we see is healthier choices around human sexuality, whereas Mormonism and many other religions are guilty of complete abstinence. We don't talk about it. We don't anything. And in those communities, we see more STDs, more rape, more molestation, child molestation. We're going to see more unplanned pregnancy. I mean, it's the same thing. If we are teaching our children from a very young age how to have healthy boundaries around these enjoyable, pleasurable, but also very easy to misuse, abuse, and can eventually become addictions, what we end with is healthier societies with a lot less crime. I think we could say the same thing about marijuana right now in our world. We've legalized marijuana. Well, why? There's no way to regulate it. Go ahead, Mason. Yeah, Ian's pointing. Ian, we need to have you on more often because you're like the subtle, Sarah, shut up and give your husband a chance to talk. We need you on the show more often.
You have no idea, Ian, how many times I raise my hand and then she just keeps talking.
I get around to you eventually.
Most of the time, yes.
Squirrel.
I just want to say that I think we've met our point here. Maybe let's throw in a scripture here or two, and then kind of go off into the direction of what our personal experiences have been and how to, because I certainly want to get to the point too where we talk about how do we overcome this, how do we get through this, how do we regain our authority and power in our lives.
Absolutely. So, but before we do that, Ian, is there any other really important highlights that you want to bring up from that article or from the origins and intentions? Is there anything else you want to add before we shift?
No, I'm good with what we've covered right now. I encourage everyone to read this report. It's very well written. Again, it's written in 1974, so there's updates that can be made to it. Right. But the guy did a really great job of putting this together. He's got footnotes and everything, so it's a very well written report, as the master's thesis should be. But yeah, no, I don't.
So to start out, then, because we're talking about, regaining our authority, regaining our power, recognizing when things are being used or weaponized to control us. I just want to bring out a couple of scriptures, and these are from the Doctrine and Covenants. Because we're talking about the word of wisdom, comes from the Doctrine and Covenants. There's verses, I'm sure, in the New Testament as well, but I did not track any of those down. But in Doctrine and Covenants, section 58, verses 26 and 27, God is saying to Joseph Smith, "For behold, it is not meet that I should command in all things. For he that is compelled in all things, the same is a slothful and not a wise servant, wherefore he receiveth no reward." And I want to point out kind of, and maybe we've already caught this, but there's this contradiction of, if I have to compel you in all things, you're a slothful servant and you get no reward. And yet we're taking, in Mormonism, we're taking these things and we're making them a part of the temple recommend. We're making them a part of, you must live these things in order to get your salvation through your temple ordinances. And, maybe that doesn't translate into the church controlling all things in our lives. Of course it doesn't, but they are controlling some pretty significant things. And, I think that needs to be pointed out and just recognize that that in one place God is saying, I don't want to command you in all things. I want you to I want you to have a brain. I want you to make some choices on your own. I want you to recognize, you know what? I got drunk last night. I hated it. I'm not ever doing that again. Or I want you to recognize, you know what? I had a few last night, and actually it was a great experience. We had a good time with friends. It was no big deal. I'm okay. I'm learning my limits, that kind of thing. And that's where I want you to be instead of just being commanded.
So, Mason, I missed it. Where was that scripture again? What's the location?
That's in Doctrine and Covenants section 58. See,
and one of the things that I find really interesting, again, coming back to behavioral control, that cult-like characteristic, is that we've got on one hand, the Doctrine and Covenants is God speaking directly to his people. And yet Mormonism is one of the most legalistic religions I'm familiar with. I mean, we are definitely higher up. We're not the most legalistic, not by any means, but the list of rules, the task list, is so fucking long in Mormonism, but God's not supposed to command us in all things. Yes, Sarah says, fuck shit, damn ass bitch. You got it, Sarah. It's coming out, damn it.
But Sarah, what you're saying is that it's pharisaical.
Yes.
Yes.
Is that we're readopting the laws of the Pharisees.
Yep.
We're giving. I mean, we're going down the road that Jesus got pissed off about.
Yes.
And if you, I mean, you guys talk about, what was it? Where you guys, you throw fits or get really angry.
Adult tantrums.
He got mad.
Yeah.
He got real mad. Started kicking over carts and stuff. So when we start adding this stuff up on it, we're not operating in his bracketry at all.
Yeah. Well, and I want to, because you brought that up, you've actually talked about that twice now, the temple thing. I think there's an important piece of that maybe people aren't completely familiar with. What he got upset at was the money exchangers. What had happened was the Pharisees had decided that you couldn't bring your own money into the temple. You had to come and exchange your money for a fee, of course. You had to exchange your money. So here's my $1.25. Give me $1 that then I can go in and donate to the church. And that's where that issue was suddenly now my money is tainted. You don't even want my money except if I pay more for it, right? Well, here's my $1. I want to give $1. I'm sorry, we won't take $1 today. You have to pay $1.25. And that was the real issue there, was how much control the Pharisees had now over even what you donated and sacrificed and how you did it. Go ahead, Sarah.
I hear you, Mason, saying that, just to rephrase that really simply, is Jesus was pissed because they monetized the temple experience.
Yes.
You could not get in without monetizing it. So you basically had to pay your way into salvation.
Yes.
And then I look at what we have to do to get into the temple with that 10% tithing. So you've got to obey all the health codes. You've got to obey all these, sexual rules. You've got to be modest. You've got to this. And we've monetized the modern day temple experience.
Right.
So if I want to take this and make this a very blunt statement, you have to buy your way into heaven in Mormonism.
Yeah.
And that was never the intent if you look at things historically. Now, I'm going to say I think the Bible is more a book of symbolism and myth and whatnot. And I know a lot of our listeners are going to look at that as solid scripture. And it doesn't matter how you're looking at this, from what lens. I hope you can see that if you believe the Bible to be 100% the word of God, Jesus condemned monetizing the temple experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else about that verse, Ian? Anything that you wanted to share?
No, that's excellent. Thank you for adding that.
Well, and I want everybody that's not, seeing this, because we're not actually posting this to YouTube. At least we're not at this point. But Ian gave me a big thumbs up, hell yeah, Sarah. On that, we've monetized this. So So
Yeah.
y'all know Ian agrees with me. That makes me feel good.
Well, and
I can't tell you how much I think what you said, it was spot on. It's wrong. I mean, it is honestly dead set wrong. If you believe as a religion that this is your holy temple and you need to go there and absolutely worship at it, spiritually, what you have as man, your things, right, should never play in part as part of that ever.
Right.
And that is what is really frustrating to me, that has gone on and that I've been confronted with on a regular basis. I mean, I've talked to you guys briefly about my last Temple Recommend meeting, and we talked about a lot of things. And one of them was tithing, and it was a very short discussion, and words were
Exchanged.
very, very blunt, you could
Well,
say.
and Ian, I know you well enough to, I'm watching your nonverbal communication skills here. I know that this is getting passionate for you. Is there another personal experience regarding this that you would like to share, either with the word of wisdom or any of those?
Well, yeah, and we're talking about the same Temple Recommend meeting where, okay, it's a 3-stage set. Again, I was a non-member for a long time, and then I was a member, and I tried to stay with the word of wisdom as best I could. Unfortunately, I also had migraines, right? And these migraines are caused by traumatic brain injuries.
Thank you, U.S. military.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Some of them severe enough that I was actually had brain swelling and I was unconscious for a couple days. So when me trying to fix that, going to doctors and stuff like that, and every doctor I went to, as soon as they sat me down, they said, look, we do not want to go the route of putting you on a prescription medication because it is going to affect you in ways you have no idea. And knowing who I am personally when it comes to medication, I'm an incredible lightweight. Every drug I take seems to affect me almost twice as much as it should.
Wow.
Same for me, actually. I'm the
Yeah.
lowest dose is usually the best one for me. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and right on top, exactly right on top of that. So I get, I go to the temple. I remain faithful to the word of wisdom. Really was messing me up and made me a horrible dad, made me a horrible husband, made me a horrible person. Because I was fighting these, I could feel the migraines coming on weekly. Just they're in the back of my eyes, and I was just feeling them come in. And I was just trying to figure out how to get rid of them. I was taking huge doses of Tylenol and Motrin.
So you're killing your liver and your stomach lining. Yeah. Well, so now you're getting stomach ulcers and liver disease.
And I went down the same road that you did, where I was fighting constipation and I was fighting explosive rectal discharge, which was
delicious.
Exciting.
We told you today was going to be a shitty show, right?
There you go. So I finally sat down with a bishop who had a doctor's degree, and he said, Ian, you have migraines. Take care of them. And at that point, it was a non-discussion between he and I. And for several years, while he was my bishop, I kind of enjoyed going to the temple. I was in good standing. I could hold a calling and all that other stuff. I got all these approvals, right?
Wait. Well, so you mean you were drinking coffee, you had a bishop that was very nuanced. So you were able to go to the bishop and say, look, my doctor says drink the coffee. And that bishop was like, go for it. You do you. Here's your temple recommend. Is that what I heard you say?
That's exactly what happened. Okay. So, and this bishop's also a doctor of internal medicine.
That helps.
So, yeah, it helped. Anyway, I've got a
just
person that's
squirrel.
Anyway,
squirrel.
What happened? We ended up moving out here to Carthage, and I sat down with the bishop at the time, and apparently people were reporting on me that they saw me drinking coffee, and I think I was in good standing with the Lord. And part of the problem that Connor was having such behavioral issue was my example
Of course.
of
Wait,
coffee.
wait, wait. So you're telling me number one, yes, tattletelling is a total cultural thing, but what you're also saying is that people were saying that Connor's behaviors, which were due to severe ADHD and being on the autism spectrum, was negatively impacted because of your coffee. Inventions.
Oh,
Aren't they
yeah.
amazing? That is Sarah being sarcastic, right? Sarah being sarcastic. Wow, that's some reality-based thinking.
And it was in that discussion where I talked to that bishop about where my increase had gone from tithing that month, and where and how I was with, the word of wisdom. And he proceeded to tell me, well, you should substitute something else for it. And I said, no, it doesn't work. Coffee seems to be the perfect dosage. I haven't been able to imitate it with energy drinks, which are horrible for you. And he even said, well, when I was in college, I took Vibrant. And I was like, how is that even applicable to the word of wisdom? And I said, because the original word of wisdom was a health guidance. Mm-hmm. And there's no way you can say Vibrant just to stay awake a little longer so you can make a final is somehow good for you.
Right.
And I can tell about how I talk is that I'm getting really, really wound up about this because it was so infuriating, just sitting there and being coddled down to.
Well, let me give you this emotional spin. Ian, they weren't hearing you. There was no attempt to understand the excruciating medical issue you're dealing with. For anybody who struggles with chronic migraines, they knock you on your ass, you become dysfunctional. You know what I hear you saying, Ian, is I was a shitty dad during that time. Not because I'm a shitty dad, but because I was in pain inside my brain,
right?
Where being able to work through that, those issues are challenging. You say, I wasn't as good of a husband. Go ahead, we'll pause.
Lessa would like to say something.
Hey, Lessa. This is my seminary student. Scripture mastery was so much fun, and we threw gummy worms at each other in seminary. Telling you, our families are eternally bonded. Go ahead, Lessa.
So this also brings to mind the chronic problem within everybody, especially in the medical field, doctors not listening to their patients because patients are the ones who are experiencing these things. You might have a doctorate, but you don't get the migraines.
Yeah.
This is also in the church. Like, these are not your sins. You're just an outside perspective. Like, your point of view comes second at the end of the day.
Have you heard about the 2018 study that showed half of prenatal vitamins tested had unacceptable levels of heavy metals? No? Well, now you have. I'm Kat, mother of 3 and founder of Ritual, the company making traceability the new standard in the supplement industry. I remember staring at my prenatal vitamins and finding all these things I was trying to avoid. High amounts of heavy metals, synthetic colorants, and unnecessary ingredients. So, at 4 months pregnant, I quit my job and started Ritual because I believe that all women deserve to know what they're putting in their bodies and why. I'm so proud of our prenatal vitamin. The ingredients are 100% traceable, it's third-party tested for microbes and heavy metals, and recently received the Purity Award from the Clean Label Project. You see, we trace like a mother because, let's be honest, no one cares quite like a mother. But don't just take my word for it. Trace for yourself with 25% off at ritual.com/podcast.
Well, and I love that, Lessa, because what you're talking about is what I teach my couples in clinic all the time is you have to understand, and the partner, the person that's on the other end of that, has to verbalize that they get it so that you feel heard and understood. before you can jump into problem solving.
I think she needs to say that with a little bit more passion and tell us exactly how you feel, Alessa.
That's right.
I'm being sarcastic. That was terrific.
Yeah,
that was very
beautifully stated. Because if medical providers, if partners in committed relationships, if parents and children, if bishops can sit in council and listen to understand the lived experience of the other person, and as Brene Brown says, believe that person. Like, a lot of the human habit is, it cannot be that bad. They're making this up. It's all in their head. Like, that's the natural human thing, is it cannot be that bad. But if I'm able to postpone my judgment, as Lessa so beautifully said, your judgment of this needs to just be off the table. Number one, I'm sitting to understand, to hear the problem, to do these things, and to believe the person who is telling me this. It is not my job. I'm not the interrogator. This is not a prosecution system where I'm trying to justify and whatnot. This is Ian, you are coming to me, you are in pain. I think it would have been more appropriate for the doctor to say something along the lines of, I can't imagine how invasive that pain must be, or how much stress that places on you and your family. Have you followed the doctor's recommendations? Are you following the doctor's recommendations? Right. Are you living your life in the best way you know how? Do you feel that this coffee drinking is a sin? You don't feel like it's a problem. You feel like you are managing things in the best way you can. God trusts you to figure it out for you. Here's your temple recommend.
Well, and that's the problem that has been created by making it a rule. Mm-hmm. Basically, when you've weaponized this tool, you played Bishop Roulette. And one time... Roulette, whatever.
There's a lot of echo all of a sudden. I'm not sure where the echo's coming from in our microphones.
You played the Bishop Roulette, and the one time you won. You got a bishop that was able to understand, was able to allow you, why that was even necessary, allow you to follow doctor's recommendations and find something that worked for you. And then the second time, you played Bishop Roulette and you got killed, right?
The bullet was in the chamber that time.
Because he couldn't take the time to say, okay, help me understand, Ian. It sounds like you've done a lot of things to try and manage these migraines. Would you say that you've done everything that you can think of and that doctors have provided for you? And you can say, yeah, I feel like I have. And the only thing that I've found that works is coffee. And it works well. Like, I'm not willing to give it up because my life is better from that medicine.
Right.
Yeah, I was able to reduce the Tylenol intake to 1, maybe 2 a week. I was able to reduce the Motrin down to 120 millimeter a day. It works.
In a lot of ways, it would be like telling someone your ADHD kid cannot have Ritalin because you make it from cocaine. In a lot of ways, it's a similar situation. Like, cocaine is against the word of wisdom. You can't have a drug that comes from cocaine.
Right. It's methylphenidate.
Right.
It's methylphenidate. Yeah.
Right. But it's made from cocaine. My local anesthetics, what I use to numb people, what I use to give an epidural so that you don't feel pain during delivery, it comes from cocaine. And not directly, but that's how we discovered local anesthetics and how we built them. So the one that we typically use doesn't come directly from cocaine, but the whole process came from studying and learning how cocaine worked. So you're taking something that you have discovered that works very well to put you in a position where you can be a good man, where you can be happy with your performance as a husband, as a father, and you want to take that away because of what seems very arbitrary in someone's interpretation of a rule.
Right. I've got 2 things here. Number one, Mason, I'm going to challenge you on one word that you used.
No, I won't take it.
Yes,
no
you
challenges.
Will. You're on my show. Yes, you will.
See, we see where the authority lies now, don't we, Ian?
Oh, I wear the pants in this show. because dresses are so uncomfortable.
Oh, just say what your thing is. Come on, out with it.
Challenge the idea of drinking coffee makes Ian a good man. I'm going to challenge that.
No,
because,
that's not what I said.
Well, let me finish.
Okay.
Let me finish. You are not allowed to interrupt me. I am allowed to interrupt you. This is not a two-way street.
Watch this then.
Love it. So anyway, but number one is when we say it makes you a good person or a better person, I don't like that because we fall into that polarized thinking, that black and white thinking. Rather, drinking coffee managed an issue that helped you live up to be the person you wanted to be.
That's what I thought I said. And so if that's not how I said it, I appreciate the clarification.
Right. Number two, yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Mace. When I challenge you, normally it's just the clarification for the listener.
Words matter. Words matter.
Yes, they do. And please call me out when I misuse them unless it's
sure.
the F-bomb.
I'm not that brave.
I'm allowed. Brat. All right. Number two, I want to say, Ian, you're not alone. And I've talked on the show previously about chronic constipation. So after I gave, number one, constipation runs in my family, but after I gave birth to my oldest biological son, Hayden, I started to struggle with constipation to the point of fissures, bleeding with poo. I was gaining weight because of the bowel load, not fat. Like as soon as you give me an enema or I drink some Mag Sit, I could lose, in the upwards of 5 to 8 pounds, which is not healthy. It is not supposed to be that way. I'm the reason that, society started to get, people who struggled like me, that's the reason why cleaning out your colon became so popular, because I was full of shit. Maybe literally and figuratively.
Still is sometimes.
Hey, be nice. And I remember sitting with, I don't remember if it was my OBGYN or if it was the first GI specialist that I saw. And Mason, I'm going to ask you really quick to step away from your mic and go tell our kids to stop moving around, like start a new movie because they're being pains. So Mason is stepping away from the mic because I can hear my kids doing things they're not supposed to be doing right now in the waiting room here at the recording studio. Squirrel. So anyway, but I went to a GI specialist or a surgeon or somebody and got my first rectal exam, and they were like, look, you're really young, but you are struggling with extreme constipation. And Ian, like you, I'm a super lightweight. So the medications that they prescribed took me so far at the lowest doses. Now I've got chronic diarrhea and I'm dehydrated, and there was no way managing that. And then they were like, increase your fiber. And I'm like, I'm eating all the fiber. And they're like, well, your motility's a little sluggish. Well, let's give you something for motility. And suddenly I'm too mobile. Like, there was not this balance. Say that again.
I used to call that the pharmacy shuffle.
Yes.
You go to a doctor, your doctor sends you to a specialist gives you a prescription, you go to the pharmacy. Things work okay, they don't work okay, you go back to the doctor, you go to the specialist, you go to the pharmacy shuffle.
Right. After about 6 months of the pharmacy shuffle, and you got to add the toilet in there, because I would either I would never go to the toilet, or I wouldn't leave the toilet. I was worshiping it. I was sitting upon my porcelain throne, screaming out orders at the kids, trying to nurse a newborn. Like, it was very stressful for me. Like, it literally, constipation was changing my ability to function within my home. And after 6 months, the doctor was like, I honestly feel like if you drink just a little bit of coffee, like, it's not going to be as strong as these prescription medicines, but it will give you some better motility going on. And if you're eating that fiber and drinking that water, I think that's going to really solve things for you. And I literally, in my Mormon world, my TBM world, that's against the word of wisdom. The Lord will bless me and fix this if I don't do that. Hayden is 16 years old. From that time, I've now had 4 colonoscopies, with my last one being 5 days ago. Yeah, Monday of this week that we are recording, I had a colonoscopy. My first 3 colonoscopies came back with hemorrhoids, fissures, polyps, low motility, problems. I started drinking coffee 18 months ago. It tastes like shit. Like, I did not like it. I was putting a lot of sugar in it. I'm now way down to almost black coffee. But y'all, I'm here to say that coffee is absolutely an acquired taste for most people. And that's fine. But I have found that my daily 9 ounces a day that I sip on over the course of an hour in the morning has changed my toilet habits. And on this last colonoscopy, y'all, there were 0 fissures, 0 polyps, 0 hemorrhoids, beautiful motility. Everything looks healthy. And for the first time in my life, I will be 42 at the end of this month, the end of March. I'll be 42. Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
You're just
Right. I'm a baby still. I should not be having these colon issues at 42. And at 42 years old, I got the all clear. I don't need to see you back for another colonoscopy for 10 years. And that's my 4th one, I think. And it's clean. For me personally, when I look at my history, coffee healed my colon, literally. Because I now have regular bowel movements. My poopies look like snakes in the potty, just like they're supposed to. And I am no longer in extreme abdominal pain, discomfort, lots of bloat, like all of those GI issues, all those irritable bowel GI issues have gone away. Now, having said that, on the health thing, I want to say for a lot of people, coffee causes GI issues.
Yeah.
So really what we're looking at again is how do we empower our listeners, each individual person, to be able to say coffee works for me or coffee doesn't work for me. You know, I've got one kid with ADHD that he's completely off Vyvanse, and he sips on coffee throughout the day until 3 o'clock, and he is able to stay off of, I think he was on 50 milligrams of Vyvanse at its highest, and he had maxed out Concerta at one point. So this is my 18-year-old who really, really struggled, had to take ADHD meds in order to function. Now he just sips on coffee and his ADHD problems are solved. I have a older teenage daughter who wanted to try coffee for her ADHD because that runs in my family. You know, I have it, my kids have it. And she had the jitters and like it made her nervous and anxious. So coffee doesn't work for her.
Yeah.
That's okay. This is about making those individual decisions.
Now
So
that
you're not
you know,
alone.
Now that you know that Sarah's bought stock in the coffee companies.
Yeah.
But I think that's the point, right? The point is that if you completely limit someone to a substance, you may find that you've made their lives worse because they don't have what they need to get better. And it's not like you didn't try other things, as you explained. You tried lots of other things, the things that would normally work for most people, and then you found something that worked. And so you need to be able to have the ability to use that.
Right. And this brings us back to what Ian said earlier of drinking coffee was the invention of sin. My medicine, Ian's medicine, Briggs' medicine, people all over the world's medicine is suddenly sinful. But substances that we have these long histories of, they will cause over time nasty side effects, are not sinful. It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
No. And yeah, and one of the things that really upset me about that whole meeting is that I'm sitting across the table from this person, and I get it. He's a doctor also. He's a doctor of psychology. You probably can figure out who I'm talking about.
I know who you're talking about now. From my perspective, not a good doctor of psychology. Did not practice very ethically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's sitting across the table from me, and the fact that I was sitting there, I was a first sergeant in the United States Army. There's only one rank higher for an enlisted personnel in the Army. I have a background clearance secret clearance, actually top secret with secret read-ons, that took me 3 days to go to Washington and two lie detector tests to actually be read off those when I left the Army. So I also had managed to raise a family of 4 and keep a wife loving me, if I could do that, or manage
She
to earn
is an
that
angel.
for 25 years at that point, so I'm a pretty good person. And for him to absolutely show the lack of respect to that was astonishing to me.
Yeah.
I was like, who the fuck do you think you're talking to?
He's insulting your intelligence. Like you're not smart enough to know what's best for you.
Yeah. And I said, you might outrank me, sir, in our civilian counterpart. But if you place me against you in where we have access and what we actually know, I've got you beat 6 ways of Sunday. I'm scary that way. And that's when you're a counterintelligence special agent, you're investigating those with the highest clearance. So you have higher than their clearance. So, and it was so offensive. And I was like, and after talking to many men that are in the church, and unfortunately most of them are not in the church anymore, they ran into the same thing, the complete lack of respect from somebody that got labeled a bishop, or somebody that got labeled
I am here to say Ian is a very scary guy, y'all. Don't piss him off. Mason.
Well, and you've brought to light one of the problems with religion in general is that the spiritual power turns into physical power, or spiritual authority turns into physical power. In this case, like the bishop had the ability to say, look, I understand that this is the choice that you've made and I can respect that. I don't believe that makes you temple worthy. And that's kind of where I stand on that, but he doesn't have to demean you with that. Like that, maybe that wouldn't have been the right answer, but it's better than demeaning the person that's there. But I just want to read something. So one more scripture now. Now we're in Doctrine and Covenants section 89, which is the revelation on the word of wisdom. Verse 2 says, to be sent greeting, not by commandment or constraint, but by revelation and the word of wisdom, showing forth the order and will of God and the temporal salvation of all saints in the last days. But I think it's important to point out, it says in the very the second verse, not by commandment or constraint. In other words, God is saying, this is not about controlling you. This is my will in your temporal salvation. If you can avoid these things and do these things, I think you're going to be better off. But we've taken it and we've weaponized it, and now it is a way to control behavior or get rid of the people who won't fall in line. And that is not what it was intended for. I don't feel like that's the message from Jesus. It certainly is the message from a lot of religion and religious leaders.
Right. And I want to reframe a little bit, Mason, of what you said. I agree with what you've said, but I want to reframe it again in the religion has taken this to control behavior so that they have power over you as a person.
Yes.
So we've got about 5-10 minutes left of our show today. So I want to make sure that everybody has, is there anything else that Mason or Ian that you want to say in these minutes before I kind of wrap up with answering that question to our listeners of what next? What do I do now? So go ahead.
I think I've said my piece. Anything that you feel like you need to say, Ian?
I want to kind of tell everyone where I'm coming from on this. I'm still a member, and I don't have a problem with being a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, okay? What I have run into on numerous occasions is people that have taken what is scriptures, what is doctrine, and they've absolutely bastardized it. And I hate to label people, but it's I call it Salt Lakeism.
Yes.
And I really implore people that listen to this is that do your research, look things up, make a decision for yourself. Your relationship with Jesus Christ is your relationship with Jesus Christ, and that's the end of it, right there. The everything else, if somebody tells you something, if somebody says something, if so and so said something about this or whatever, you're not allowed to walk across the grass on certain days because that's going to affect your temple
Right.
recommend. Be willing to call bullshit.
Yes.
It's okay if you're offensive at times, because there's people that honestly just need to be said to, hey, no, that's not right. That's not what Jesus taught.
Right.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whoever came after him. It's what did Jesus teach us? And we need to concentrate on that.
I love
Very
that,
nice.
Ian, because what you're basically saying is utilize your critical thinking skills and have an
Absolutely.
opinion, because these rules do not work for everybody. Very rarely does a rule or anything really serve every person that the rule is meant to apply. We need to be able to embrace thinking for ourselves. And I love that you're encouraging people to do research, because we've been taught since we were itty bitty that doing research outside of what the church tells us is true is, again, invented sin. It's sinful, it's anti. And I think for those of us that have looked at that, we're like, hey, this gives us more context. It gives us more understanding of things, but it allows us to go, that doesn't make sense. Let's course correct. The only thing that the truth of the Mormon Church's history threatens is the Mormon Church. It does not threaten your relationship with the Savior Jesus Christ if you want to have one. And I know lots of people in their faith transition out of the church, they really struggle with having a relationship with a higher power in any capacity, because the betrayal trauma is so strong, they don't know how to do that anymore. The truth is supposed to set you free. But
Absolutely.
when you are a victim of this cult-like mentality, this behavior control, your ability to connect in meaningful ways spiritually becomes fractured and broken, and it takes a lot of time for that to heal. So in closing, I would say to that listener that says, okay, so Sarah, this is all great, now what? I'm going to encourage you to identify where your behavior is being controlled in an undue influence, unhealthy power dynamic, but also where you as the individual are trying to, in an unhealthy way, control other people. Because I guarantee we all have that to some extent, whether it's moments or if it's a consistent thing. We need to be able to own and have that accountability of, I'm exercising unrighteous dominion over somebody else. I am practicing undue influence over somebody else. It's educate yourself and learn about these patterns. Ian, one of the things that I love about you, and one of the things that really benefits our relationship, is you are very comfortable, and you have on multiple occasions called me out in a very public way, mostly on social media platforms, to say, Sarah, that's bullshit. I disagree. And this is why. And you and I are able to exchange in dialogue that is not threatening. And that's one of the greatest things about our relationship is we are allowed to critically think and own our own opinions and hold the things that are valuable to us, and still be bonded over poopy Legos or whatever the case may be. But we have been friends, right? We've been friends forever. And you and I have never sat in each other's homes. We've never had a conversation where we've been like, yeah, I agree with you 100% on everything you've just said. We disagree. we think critically, and we say, hey, this works for me, that works for you, I love you, and I feel as though that is free of judgment from you and Jill and the kids. And as your kids are growing up and becoming adults, our relationship with them, it's like our family is just, it's getting deeper. And I want to encourage our listeners to do this. If you find yourself in a relationship where it's all or nothing, it's always black and white. It's you have to agree with me. We have to be on the same page. You're not allowed to criticize something that I hold valuable. There's a problem. There is a mind control. There is a behavioral control.
Yeah.
There is undue influence. It's culty. And the beauty of relationships, which we've been able to experience, is we can be different. We can disagree. We can even disagree in public with passion and love the fuck out of each other at the end of the day.
Yeah, there's a level of respect for each other's intellect and background that we both understand, and also our the family's relationships helps hugely. And I tell this to people. I said, if you come across a personality and you disagree with them, and you're not allowed to disagree with them, get away from that person.
Yes, or organization or relationship, not just get away from the person. Insert get away from it.
Yeah, get away from them, because you clearly they don't respect you. You're not an automaton. You're not here to just do what they want you to do. It's funny. People say, well, you spent 22 years in the military. You must just be like a robot. And I said, absolutely not. I was a non-commissioned officer. You never told me what to fucking do. Right. You told me that you wanted to get something done, and I got it fucking done. And that's how we worked. We don't sit there. You don't tell me how to do something. You just expect the expectation of having it get done. I will break every damn rule that you put in front of me to get it done.
Right.
That's my mentality. That's how I come across to people. That's how I am. That's who I am.
But I think too that if you then take that and apply that to religion, talked about having a relationship with Jesus Christ. If you then take that mentality, I want a relationship with Jesus Christ as my Savior, and I will break every rule that you put in front of me to accomplish that. Sometimes we think that all these rules exist so that you can have a relationship with Jesus, and for some people, that's what works. But other people, again, it turns you into a slothful servant, right? If I have to tell you everything that you're supposed to do, you're not a very good servant to me, because then I have to tell you everything that you do. I want a non-commissioned officer. I don't want a private, right? I want somebody who can think for himself and can decide what is the most important thing here. Right. How do I get that? Well, this rule here is in the way. Okay, you've already told me that is the most important thing. Get the rule out of the way.
Well, and I want to just add here, I love this, because what we're doing is we are giving people the power to have their own thoughts. Mason, you say people who have to be commanded in all things are slothful. And I see that in the Mormon culture in the sense of, I'm going to do what the church says I'm going to do so that I can spiritually bypass thinking for myself, reasoning for myself, deciding for myself. My decision is I will obey the church, and everything else is done for me. And that's dangerous. I also want to put out there that on your spiritual journey, we want to boundary that up with doing no harm. Now, like Ian, I know you're in the military, and I know there's some secret squirrely stuff that you've done in the past where ethics are very different in the do no harm space.
Say what?
But for our listeners, I want to make sure that we are encouraging, think for yourself, make these decisions for yourself, plant your seeds and grow in relationships where there's, mutual respect. If you're struggling to respect somebody, if you're dehumanizing somebody, then you got to address that. So let's plant our seeds in environments where there's mutual respect and thrive and grow in that, with the boundary being do no harm. I think you're going to be successful. When we believe that, so I'll say in closing, when I, Sarah Westbrook, believe that I am better than somebody else, and I act in a way that dehumanizes them, I become somebody that is unhealthy. And I have, in my journey out of Mormonism, I think that's one of the issues within Mason, your family towards me, is that mutual respect has never been there. Sarah is not viewed in Mason's family as a valuable participant, an educated person. I'm annoying, I'm loud, don't listen to her, I'm dehumanized. And these people that are probably very upstanding citizens and doing the best they can in the world that they have are missing out on this bond, Ian, that like our families are able to share, where we can get in and have dinner and have a discussion where we're all throwing around our ideas and then still laugh at dessert and hug each other goodbye and get in the car and drive away without any hard feelings or any contention. That's what we are striving for. So, dear listener,
and not all of my family,
right? Not all of them,
but some of them. Some of them are definitely like that.
We're Sarah and I, we share some of the similar
right. Well,
things.
Because some of my family has worked hard to not be like that, and so I just want to make sure that, their efforts are recognized and appreciated.
Right. I was specifically referring to some of the other things we've already shared on the podcast to illustrate the point that if you catch yourself dehumanizing somebody or you are being dehumanized, as Ian said earlier, run away. So, hi, Jill. We love you. We're going to have to get Jill on here later. We'll talk more about poopy Legos in primary.
Or when we went to your house, I can't see a darn thing without my glasses. Or when we went to your house and you had to ask Connor to step into the other room so that he could find the other Legos that he had confiscated from your boys. Wherever.
I'd forgotten about that one. I knew where those Legos had gone.
Yeah,
and we were concerned about, stealthy theft.
That it was painful when he sat down.
Yes, because he sat down, he's like, ow. And I'm like, oh. Yeah, if y'all listeners, we will close on this. Just take a moment to understand male anatomy. Imagine
this is how we're closing. This is how we're closing. We're gonna close.
We're closing on a
thoughts
squirrel.
Of male anatomy.
Hang on, let me finish. We're closing on a squirrel. Imagine the pain of stepping on a Lego, and now put the two together of what it might feel like to sit on Legos tucked away in your underwear.
Now listen, you were the primary president when he also snuck in a BlackBerry. I don't even know. I just want to know.
Yeah.
So
I will love that boy with all my heart for the rest of my life.
He's doing amazing. He's a travel welder.
Yes, he is. He's doing amazing, and I love him. And sometimes he'll just call me and we'll just talk, and I love it. So listeners, find relationships that you can laugh in, love in, and thrive in. Thanks for joining us today. We'll talk to you next time.
Love you guys.
Thanks, Ian. Today's episode was hosted by Sarah and Mason Westbrook, produced by Daisy Girl Communications and Alex Fidalis. We would love to see you on our Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma Facebook page. Today's music provided by Run to Life and John Worthy Music. That's awesome.
Shop Plato's Closet tax-free August 2nd through 4th for back-to-school styles. We sell the trendy, gently used styles you need to make a difference in the world and in your wallet for back-to-school shopping. Save up to 70% off regular retail prices by choosing recycled styles. Save even more when you shop tax-free this weekend. Make a change that others can respect and repeat. Shop Plato's Closet in North Charleston and West Ashley this year for your back-to-school looks. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.
Chicken tacos should only be trusted to chicken professionals. That's where we come in. Introducing Zaxby's new chicken finger tacos. One comes with pico de gallo and creamy chipotle ranch. And the other comes with bacon, lettuce, tomato, and avocado ranch. Chicken experts since 1990. Chicken taco experts since now. Order yours today in the Zax Rewards app. Woo, saucy! Zaxby's.